I don't know if this is gonna make sense to y'all, but y'all let me know. So I just be doing a lot of thinking. Sometimes it turns into philosophizing, right? And so I was just thinking about the concept of God, right? The creator, right? And the idea of him being one, all knowing, and omnipotent, and never being wrong, right? And then people will say, like, if God was this omnipresent, omnipotent, good being, how does so much bad stuff happen, right? And I look at it like this. If we look at God as being a computer code, I feel like our world would be so much easier, because if you understand computer coding, you know that it's a series of ones and zeros that make up everything, right? And with computer coding, sometimes you have errors, sometimes you have viruses, sometimes you have crashes, right? That doesn't necessarily mean the code is bad. Sometimes it can be things that are plugged into the computer, right? Sometimes it can be the outlet. Sometimes it could be a power shortage that causes the program to malfunction, right? And so if you look at sin as a virus, it's infecting the computer coding, right? And so now that the program is running, it's looking for a series of ones and zeros. And anything that's not a one or a zero, or is a one or a zero in the right sequence, just isn't going to compute. And so I look at this as being like the idea of a sin, or like a shortcoming or something like that, where it's like God doesn't necessarily look at the heart of the person and the mindset of the person. He's literally looking at the computer coding, where it's like, thou shalt not lie. I just saw and registered a lie. So your zero is now a one, and it no longer fits in this order of the sequence. So I can no longer communicate with this character, right? As opposed to him being like, you're wrong and you're bad and you did X, Y, and Z. But now hear me out now. That's why we had to have Jesus, right? So Jesus is the computer programmer, right? God is the code. Jesus is the programmer. And so he's interpreting the errors in the code, right? And when you fall short or slip up, and God is interpreting your one as a zero or your zero as a one, Jesus is the one who comes in. He looks at the programming and he decides whether or not we can continue, or what do we need to do to alter the programming to make the program run properly again, right? And so without Jesus, none of us would be able to actually correspond with the coding or the program. We are just ones and zeros in the sequence that are being affected by different viruses plugged into the computer, i.e., sins, fallacies, shortcomings are the viruses or the power shortages. Like, when you get disconnected from God, when you get disconnected from who you are or what it is you're supposed to be doing in your life, those are the viruses, the power shortages. Like, you have a component that goes bad in the screen, and then you have to figure out what it is you need in your life to get back on track, right? And Jesus is going to tell you what's going to revamp and reboot the program and get you back in line with where you're supposed to be. So God is a program. Jesus is the programmer. We are parts of the code. I came up with this concept about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and this is probably the most fleshed out way I've ever been able to voice it. And if you rocked with me through this whole explanation, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is this a good analogy or not? Does it make sense to you? And does it help you understand like the place Jesus holds in the world, and also just more about the way that God is? Is I'm not gonna lie. Once I found out that God was everything and everywhere, and then Jesus was supposed to be a part of God and everything and everywhere, I was mad confused on why we give Jesus as much, praise, worship, and credit as we do if we're not supposed to have any gods before God. But now that I think about things like this, I understand, because without Jesus, the program wouldn't even be working, and we cannot directly speak to the code. So the programmer has to interpret it for us.